I'm Amy Morgan, the feature writer for the Marriage Initiative, and I am just so pleased today to introduce you to Star and Hans Molegraaf. This Houston area couple overcame great obstacles in their young marriage through the help of Christian counseling and support like Family Life's Weekend to Remember. They helped others restore their relationships as event speakers with Family Life before founding their own ministry, Marriage Revolution, in 2010. Now, Hans counsels couples, trains close to a dozen counselors, and creates content like the book, You're Being Lied to, The Truth About Marriage and How to Make It Work. Together, they host marriage intensives for individual couples and groups and introduce a date box resource that delivers creative dates right to your doorstep. Star and Hans, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having us, Amy. We're excited about it.
Yeah, well, you have quite a testimony of how God redeemed your marriage, which incidentally has now lasted 30 years and includes 6 children that you, Star, homeschooled. Can you share your journey? So kudos to you. That is amazing. Can you share your journey?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so we got started really, really young. My wife and I met. You were 18 and I was 19. I just graduated from high school and off of my first year at school, and we were at a party. And Amy, it was one of those movie style moments. I hate to glamorize it, but it really was like this. Like, I saw her from across the room and I was like, I have to be with her. And so I went in to talk to her, and really the rest is history. We hit it off really fast that night and started dating right away. And I have to mention, though, at this point, we weren't living for the Lord whatsoever. Right. We were living a godless lifestyle. And so our lives were full of partying and sleeping together. And I grew up in a Christian home, but there was no personal relationship with Jesus here whatsoever. So there was no conviction at all about the lifestyle we were living.
Yeah.
And we were shocked back then, but it's really no surprise now that after dating for 18 months, we found out that we were pregnant. And I got to tell you, when I saw that pregnancy, that plus sign on that pregnancy test, I went right into go mode, because that's what I do. I get things done. And so growing up in a Christian home, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I knew that I was going to marry her. I was thinking about who is going to be the best man in my wedding. And I had it all planned out. So November of 1993, we found out we were pregnant, and January of 1994, we were married. Yeah. Now, as excited as I was, Star had a little bit of a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, he mentioned that our lifestyle was pretty godless, and I just did not want us to end up in a destructive marriage. And our dating relationship was already very dysfunctional. So the idea of getting married was very scary for me. I thought, quite honestly, I felt trapped. We were kind of in a place where I was considering ending our dating relationship. I was considering breaking up and walking away. And so to find out that we were now having a baby, I was pretty terrified. But Hans was really convincing, and somewhere inside of me, I just thought, maybe we can make it. Maybe we can make this work. And so we got married in January of 94, and here we are 30 years later.
Yeah. And there's a lot in between that. And so we got married in that time, and we were pregnant. And so I knew I had to get a job. I knew I had to find a good job with benefits. I had a little college education, and that's it. But I was fortunate enough to find a decent job. Yeah. And so we moved in together, got married, got the new furniture, and everything was new, right? And kind of the honeymoon stage of marriage that everybody goes through. And so we did that for about 6 months, and things were okay. They weren't great, but they weren't destructive. And then life started to really catch up with us. Our lifestyle combined with I think the everyday impact of being married. Yeah. And so we started to fight about things that everybody fights about: finances and how to raise our daughter, Kylie, and spending time together. I was working the second shift at Compact Computers from 3:30 in the afternoon to 11:30 at night, and she was running an in-home daycare. So we were literally ships passing in the night. So we thought about that stuff, and things didn't immediately get really bad. But what did start out bad is our conflict resolution style. And in these interactions with each other, Star was a really good talker. And in the name of kind of peace, I didn't want to talk about conflict. I just wanted to ignore it and act like it wasn't okay. And as you can imagine, that made her even more frustrated and made, me even more frustrated. She's talking more. I wanted to talk less.
Yeah.
That dance spiraled out of control really quick. We never resolved anything.
Yeah.
Until finally, probably about a year in, after me stuffing away all of this conflict, some of that stuff started to come out in some pretty destructive ways. And, I didn't know it then, but you can only stuff away so long before it just starts to come out. And I was never an angry guy growing up in high school. All of my friends would say I go with the flow and, Mr. Peace, Mr. Cool, like everything's good, right?
Yeah.
And yet, 12 months into our relationship, I found myself so frustrated and so angry, I couldn't even see straight.
Wow.
And so the littlest conflict would turn into a full-blown explosion in a matter of minutes. It surprised me. It surprised Star. She didn't know what to do with it. I was finally talking, but in a really destructive way. In fact, candidly, it even led to me calling her names and being very destructive in our house, putting a fist through a wall and throwing things around, and even resulted in some physical abuse in our relationship. I mean, Amy, I never, ever, ever thought that I was going to be one of those guys.
Yeah.
I wasn't one of those guys. And yet I didn't know how to resolve conflict. And that turned into me stuffing things away and it just exploding. Yeah. And so after these bouts, Star would beg me to go to marriage counseling. And again, I was a guy who liked to get things done. And so Star, I'm not going to go to marriage counseling, but we're going to fix this. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to pull up my bootstraps and we're going to start going to church. We're going to start reading our Bible. I'm going to do this Bible study. We're going to get plugged into a small group. We did all the right things. Yeah. And as you can probably imagine, that whole pull up your bootstrap mentality to fixing your marriage, it just doesn't work. And it didn't work for us. Yeah. Things would get better, but again, I was missing what was happening underneath the surface for me. And what I was missing is a relationship with Christ. And I think even more importantly, or at least equally important, is not just a relationship with Christ, but an understanding of what it looked like to live a spirit-filled life in the moment. So I knew how to depend on Christ whenever I didn't feel like talking, whenever I felt like she was talking circles around me, and yet I needed to talk and communicate in order to resolve these conflicts. And so again, things went from bad to worse. And finally, I remember about 18 months into being married, I remember coming home from a business trip. I was gone for a week and came home and pulled up in the driveway to Star and our oldest daughter, Kylie, and their bags packed. And, I got out of the car a little bit confused and I asked her, I said, Star, what are you doing? And she's like, Hans, I'm leaving you. And I'm like, Star, you're leaving. Why? And she's like, are you kidding me? Why? Yeah. Hans, I've been begging you to go to marriage counseling for the past 6 months and nothing's changing in our marriage. I'm scared of you. And so I went to go move in with my parents. She went to go move in with her mom. And I should mention, nobody knew what was going on. Right. Like we were the family showing up to church on Sunday. Kylie had her little red bow in her hair. Like we were dressed nice. We looked good. And no one knew what was happening, including my parents. So when I called my dad and said, hey, look, I need a place to live because Star does not want to be in this marriage anymore. He's like, okay, well, you have a place to live, but you're going to go to marriage counseling. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, Dad, you don't understand. Like Star's done. She wants a divorce. Like it's just not happening. And he's like, no, Hans, you don't understand. If you want a place to live, you're going to go to marriage counseling and you're going to go alone. Yeah. And I'm so thankful that my dad saw what I needed when I didn't know what I needed. And I landed in a marriage counselor's office alone. And that was really the start of my salvation experience. And then also starting to understand what it looked like to walk in the power of the Holy Spirit every single day, in every single moment. I had to come to this realization that I wasn't strong enough or capable enough or competent enough to do this thing called marriage. And so that was really the start of my change. But at this point, Star's done. Like she's living with her mom and she wanted out. So she was in a much different position.
Yeah. In fact, the only reason that we weren't divorced was just because I didn't have the money. Yeah. And during the time where he was away on this business trip, I had become heavily involved in an affair, emotional, physical affair. And my mindset was, we were too young. We got married too quickly, and that if it weren't going to be this guy that I was seeing, I definitely wanted to experience what I was experiencing with someone at some point. And I just didn't think there was any way for Hans and I to be able to fix so much of the damage that had been done. And so he's going to counseling. Thankfully, his parents made the requirement that they did. And I'm just in the mindset of, I begged you for a long time. It's too little and it's too late. And so I'm watching him change. It's obvious that he's changing, because while Hans had an anger issue, I knew how to push every button he had. I didn't want him to be silent in our conflicts. I wanted him to talk to me. I wanted him to say something, to say anything. So I would do what I did to get him to talk. And during this separation period for us, where it appeared that he was changing, I would push those same buttons, expecting the same result, because I really just didn't believe that there was any way that he could change. I always thought that it would be just for a little while and we'd be right back where we were. But during this season, when I would push those buttons and do the things that I was used to doing to help stir up some of our dysfunction, he just didn't respond the way that I was used to him responding. In fact, it was completely different than anything I'd ever experienced with him. So I knew that it was obvious, it was evident that there was something happening in Hans. But honestly, the marriage was too dead. The idea of being able to honestly, to have him touch or kiss me ever again was more than I could bear. And so for me, the only solution was divorce. We did, however, have some women at our church that were calling me and reaching out to me and holding me accountable, which at the time I absolutely despised. But today,
our marriage champions are probably some of those women like that.
Exactly.
But I today am so thankful for those women, because at the time, I went to counseling for the wrong reasons. I went because I wanted to be able to check a box, and I wanted to please the people that were asking me. And in my mind, I thought they didn't know our secrets. They had no idea what went on in our marriage, but I'm going to go so that I can say that I went. I'm going to do 2 sessions, and I'm going to be able to say that I went, and then I'm going to walk away. Yeah. And so that's what I did. I went to my first session, and Hans wasn't in the room. It was just the counselor and I, and we were kind of getting to know each other. And I just went on this venting session of why there was no way that I could ever come back to the marriage. And I think I wanted him to understand what I'd been through. I wanted him to tell me, I wanted him to give me permission to leave, honestly. And so I'm just kind of giving my sob story, and he's just listening to me. And at the very end of everything, he looks at me very intently and says, "Star, I need to ask you a question." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "I need to ask you if you believe that Jesus Christ was raised from the dead." And I looked at him and said, "Yes, I believe that." And he said, "You don't hear what I'm asking you. Star, do you believe it? Do you believe that God took Jesus out of the grave and raised him to life again so that you could be saved?" And I said, "Yes, I do. I believe that." And he said, "So you believe that, but you don't believe that that same God has the power to heal your marriage." And I don't know why, but in that moment, that was my moment. Like, that was the moment that God wanted me to see, and the lights were turned on. And I just remembered thinking, what if he could? Like, what if God could heal my marriage? What if he could bring back what was so dead, the emotions, all of it, the idea of kissing or touching, all of it? What if he could restore it? And my counselor just began to explain to me. He said, "Star, God designed marriage. Like, he created it. He wants it to be beautiful. And he longs to give you some of the things that you're telling me that you want to have, but you don't believe that he can."
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, Amy, I turned to God this much, like the tiniest bit, toe in the water, testing it out. And for whatever reason, we began to watch God unfold things in our lives and in our marriage that we had never experienced.
Yeah. It was crazy. I mean, again, everything wasn't fixed after that counseling session, but I'll say this, that going into that counseling session for her, our marriage was still absolutely headed for divorce. Coming out of that session, the direction changed. And again, it was probably that was one of, we'll call it 10,000 steps over the next 6 months that finally led us to move back in together and to be moving in the same direction together. And so before that, I was moving in the right direction in the marriage. She was moving in the wrong direction. And then after that, we started to move in the same direction. And I mean, really, we've never looked back.
No.
And we know that's unique. And I'm not saying that our marriage is perfect and we haven't had challenges.
Right.
We have, and we still work on our relationship. We still go to counseling at times to work out things. But I'm telling you that we really have never looked back. The thought of divorce, a hint of abuse has never been present since then. And we have 6 kids to attest to it.
Yeah.
So, and what's crazy,
one of you works with you, the oldest, who actually works with you.
And that's the crazy thing.
What's a better testimony? I mean, it's just, and that is just such an inspiring story. I know that our marriage champions, I mean, that's something like that. Just like, okay, this is why. This is what makes it all worth it. This is what, when you hear something, and as soon as you guys kind of got on that same path, God then filled your heart with this desire to help others. Show us how you traced that path then.
Yeah, probably 6 months after we got back together, they were advertising a Family Life Weekend to Remember Marriage Conference. And like, again, at this point, we were moving in the same direction. We couldn't get our hands on enough stuff. If it was God related or if it was marriage related, we were in. And so it was a no-brainer for us to sign up for this conference. 2.5 days over a Friday and Sunday. And I remember sitting, and I'll let you share this part of the story because this was really you, sitting in that ballroom and seeing all these people around us and thinking about, man,
Yeah. So we're sitting in this ballroom. And for me, I did not grow up in a Christian home, and I really had no idea that God had so much to say in his word biblically about marriage, that there were so many principles that I could apply to my life that were lasting and transformative and would change me and then change us. And so I was just hungry for all of this. And so we're sitting there and we're watching this, and all I could think about was we had a lot of friends that were hurting in their marriages. Marriage is hard. If you've been married for 5 minutes, marriage is hard. And so just knowing that what we had been through and watching what God was doing in our lives and knowing the friends that I had and seeing all these people around me, I thought, I want to be a part of this. Like, I want to be a part of the solution for couples. It was just this yearning to help hurting couples. And so we're sitting there, and Family Life does their little spiel. It's a little staff ops meeting that they do. If you're interested, you can come. I mean, we've been back together for 6 months. We really had no business going on staff with anything. But it was God kind of stirring in our hearts something that he would later fulfill. And I think that was all part of it, because we went and we sat in that meeting, and it didn't pan out then. But I just think that God was kind of stirring in our hearts something that he was later going to say, this is where I want you to be. And so that was, 6 months after being back together. And then in 2006, we ended up going on staff with Family Life full time in Little Rock, Arkansas at their headquarters. And it was life-changing for us.
100%. Yeah. And so again, we just caught the ministry bug. We had experienced the death, which was destructive. And we experienced the resurrection, which was the most beautiful thing that we had ever experienced. And we wanted everybody to be able to experience the same thing. And so we gave our lives to it. And so we spent 4 years in Little Rock, which was incredible. We're so thankful to Family Life for giving us an opportunity there. And then in about 2009, we started to really feel the Lord calling us back to our hometown here in the Woodlands, Texas, and to start our own marriage ministry that was really focused on helping hurting couples and in the form of biblical marriage counseling. And so we launched that ministry in 2010, Marriage Revolution. And our mission is simple, in theory, to provide help and hope to hurting couples without ever letting money stand in the way. I should mention one part of our story that we forgot is whenever I went to marriage counseling alone, and eventually after Star started going, I was going sometimes twice a week and then together twice a week. And that back then it was $125 an hour. I was making $10.50 an hour. That just, there's no way we could have afforded it. So my dad paid for us to go to counseling. And I didn't know it back then, but that was really the kind of a seed, the first seed of what Marriage Revolution's mission was going to be. We wanted to recruit people to stand in the gap, to pay it forward for couples who need marriage counseling but can't necessarily afford it. And so again, it just fulfills our mission of never letting money stand in the way. We don't give it away for free. I wish we could, but we offer a ton of scholarships. Last year, I think we gave away $60,000 in counseling scholarships in Texas. And so we're just super excited about it. So yeah, it's been a blur. And it's hard to believe even telling this story. We've shared it so many times, but I'm so glad that we get to, because Amy, remembering where we were and then seeing what God has done
Yeah.
in our short little
Yeah.
life, and the amount of couples that he's allowed us to impact, it's just mind blowing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just absolutely mind blowing. So, anyways,
You have on your website, you have, it's like a million it's just so, do you remember exactly what that was? Because I remember looking on your website and going, wow, that
yeah,
many.
I know it sounds crazy. And actually, there's another little part of our story. I mean, that million lives affected, I think it's conservative. And again, we don't take any credit for it at all.
No.
But the day that we left Little Rock, Arkansas, to move back to Houston to start Marriage Revolution was the same day that Family Life aired our story
Yeah.
on their Family Life Today radio program.
Yeah.
Literally, Amy, I'm not kidding. Like, I'm driving in my little white Suburban from Little Rock to the Woodlands, and my phone was ringing because we had our website set up. I was getting calls from all around the country. Can you help me? Can you help me? Can you help me? And I remember in that first little rental house that we got when we came back, I was sitting on the floor, I had all these papers of all these people that were reaching out for help. And we hadn't even really started yet.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, really, so I share that to say, like, Family Life God has used Family Life as a huge platform for us through their radio program. We ended up speaking on their weekend to remember.
Yeah.
Speaker
Just like
series
you had
for 5
thought
years.
so many years before.
Just
Just like God
nuts.
gave you that vision.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
our story's been played around the country. I mean, we were at this one event through Family Life probably 10 years ago, and it was just all of the leaders from around the world. And there were people from Kenya in their robes and their hats, almost in tears, thanking us for sharing our story. And it just humbles us. We'd never met them, and would never think that our story would impact somebody halfway around the world.
Yeah.
It's just nuts. So,
And now you're training other counselors because you started counseling with Marriage Revolution and
right.
getting your biblical counseling degree. And then others came. And so you have what, close to a dozen now in 5 or 6 different places across Texas?
Exactly. Yeah. We've got 5 different offices across Texas, and we're doing our best to get permission legally in other states around the country, because we believe we've got the best product on the planet for married couples, and we want to get it in as many hands as possible. We know a lot of couples are hurting. And so, yeah, my passion is still just as much for couples, but not as much to be face-to-face, because I know just if I limit myself to face-to-face, I can only impact this many. But if I can train and raise up other counselors using the same plan that God gave me through his word back 28 years ago, and teach them how to help a hurting couple, I mean, our impact can be exponential, which is happening. And so, yeah, it's nuts. And again, we believe we're just scratching the surface. I mean, we've got a dozen or so counselors now. I'd love to have 50 counselors in 5 years. And yet we need resources to make that happen. And so we're taking it one step at a time.
And two, Star, in addition to raising all those kids, the 6 not being a small number and still having a few at home, you also do the marriage intensives. When you do intensives, you'll do that together for either an individual couple or in groups as well.
We do the intensives. And I love intensives because we did an intensive when we first came back together. When you're going through a hard time in your marriage and you go to a counseling session, which is great, but within an hour, it's over and you've just kind of started to scratch the surface. Those intensives allow couples to stay in it, to stay with the stuff, to do the work. And we have a lot of hands-on projects that they do right there while they're with us. We're available to help them work through these things. And so we watch couples over a weekend time work through a ton of material where they can really honestly begin a tremendous amount of healing in 2 days that might take months to do in counseling. And so it's very beneficial for couples, especially a couple that's in a crisis situation at the time. And so that's something we really enjoy doing together.
Well, I think equally so. So they get that steroid shot in a weekend, but the follow-up is critical, because again, we're fools and we're not suggesting that a marriage can be totally fixed in a weekend.
No.
But what it does is lay a foundation. It helps them to start to retrain their minds and for God to get a hold of their heart in a weekend and start to experience some of God's plan for marriage. And then we structure it such that we've got several follow-up counseling sessions afterwards, where we like to help them implement what we call a marriage staff meeting, where they can start to implement some of the things that they learned in our weekend together. And I got to tell you, I mean, I just got done doing one last week, 2 weekends ago, and we'll have our first follow-up counseling session Thursday. And it's like, I just love it because they're excited. They left on a high. They're still on a high. They already scheduled that first appointment.
Yeah.
And I'm going to walk with them to make sure that what we taught sticks. And maybe more appropriately put, those roots really dig in a little bit and sink in, so that, again, when things get rough, and they will, again, those roots will hold, but they're not going anywhere. Does that make sense?
Yes, and that is so encouraging. I love it. Oh, so encouraging. Let's switch gears just for a second.
Yeah.
Because you promote a resource that sounds so intriguing to me. You can find kind of a link on your website, but it's called Datebox.
Yeah.
And this is to help couples way before they ever get into that state of needing the marriage counselor. This is an enrichment opportunity, and I just think it sounds so cool. Tell me about it and what you guys offer.
Well, I'm going to get on my soapbox. I've got a lot, and this is one of them. But I'll tell you this, like, probably the most non-spiritual thing that has been responsible for our marriage to stay pointed in the right direction over the past 28 years is a weekly date night. And again, it's super simple, super practical. And we believe that what got you to the altar are dates, and what keeps you going in the right direction after the wedding day is a weekly date night. Doesn't have to be expensive, doesn't have to be fancy, but it does require you guys to get away and to spend intentional time working on the relationship. But as we've done that throughout the years, we found that some couples are like, okay, we have to do a date night, but what do we do on the date night?
Yeah.
You know, we're going to go to the same Mexican restaurant, get the same fajitas for two, and get some tres leches for dessert, and go home and go to bed. As fun as that might be every couple of months, it gets a little boring, right? And so we came across this company, Datebox, and they have essentially done the hard work for you.
Yeah.
And they give you a creative date night that you can do out, but you can also do at home. And it's a subscription-based service. They send it straight to your door every single month. And I mean, last month they did a fondue date night with a lot of discussion questions in there, with a playlist on Spotify. Again, it's super practical, super easy. Honestly, like, I mean, everybody should do it. I mean, because it's just once a month. And so we partnered with them several months ago, and we've got an offer right now that if you sign up, I think you get the first month for free. All you got to do is pay shipping, which is like $8.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And then you start getting your shipments every single month. You can pause at any time. And again, I think it's a no-brainer. I mean, and I think you get 20% off for the life of your subscription. It's like, come on, 20 or $30 a month to work on your marriage. I love it. Do you love it?
I love it. It's fun and it's creative. And I think it not only is it's great in a season too, where you might have kids and you need a sitter, and maybe you don't want to get a sitter, or maybe you put the kids to bed, but just to be purposeful. There were a lot of times where sometimes getting out of the house was hard for us. And so it's just a creative way to make sure that you're intentional about your time together as a couple. And it's fun. They're all fun.
100%. It's good stuff.
I love you said you had to take off your mom hat sometimes.
Yeah.
But the thought of planning something, too, you can gift like a package of them.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking of all of us marriage champions who have that little couple that we're trying to mentor or to lift up. I mean, what a great present for their anniversary or for Christmas to gift it to them. I mean, I'm already planning on doing that, and just knowing where, how you're uplifting it's so easy. I just loved that. I thought it was really cool and creative. I've never seen anything like it.
It's awesome. We love it. Yeah. And I'm glad you're going to try it. You should.
Yeah. Well, I'm giving it to a relative, so we'll see what they think. And again, married. Well, tell me about your books. You have a few books too, that you've kind of have your flagship about the lies. So let's talk about that. And then you have a couple fun ebooks too.
Yeah. 10 years ago, I wrote a paper for one of the classes I was in, and as I was thinking about this paper, I was thinking about really there's two competing messages for what marriage is, what it is supposed to do, and what it's for. And there's the world's message, and then there's God's message. And as I kind of looked at that, I realized that they're exactly the opposite in a lot of ways. And so it started out with this little chart, and that chart turned into a blog post, and the blog post turned into a short ebook, which has been one of our most successful or most downloaded ebooks, throughout the history of our ministry. And it was an eye opener for me because, again, we are inundated with messages. And unless we're aware of the messages either being truth or a lie, we can very easily be persuaded to believe some things about marriage that are not true at all. Because let's be honest, some of the world's lies about marriage, they sound good. And here's the hard part is that there's typically, not always, there's typically a sliver of truth in the world's message about marriage, but it's not the complete truth. And so God wants us to have the complete truth about marriage. I'll give you an example. Like one of the competing truths is that the world would say is that marriage is designed to make you happy. Well, I got to tell you, I think God wants us to enjoy marriage, but it's not all that he wants. I believe that God not only wants marriage to be an enjoyable relationship, but I think the means to get there, and I think what's more important to the Lord is that he wants marriage to be an institution that reveals what's wrong with us so that we can change. Because Amy, catch this, okay? Look, if two people are becoming more Christ-like, if they're changing to become more Christ-like and they're coming together, what's going to happen? Well, they're going to become more happy and more satisfied in their relationship. But see, people want to be happy without becoming holy. And so they want what God wants, but they don't want to do what it takes to get there. And so we need that whole truth. And so God wants us to embrace marriage as an institution that's going to reveal our weaknesses, which is sobering to think about, but it's true so that we can be aware of things that we need to see, that we don't see, that need to change. And so when we embrace that on the other side of that are some of the best days of marriage. And so again, people want happiness, but they're not willing to go through what's necessary to get there. So that's just one example.
Oh, and as people that have been married now almost 30 years, you are a testament, and you guys are such a testament. It has been such a pleasure talking to you. I can't believe we've passed our time. So thank you so much. No, you guys were such a treat. And I would encourage our marriage champions. There are several other ebooks and they're just easily to download right there on your website. But thank you guys, Hans and Star. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
It was a pleasure.
Oh, and marriage champions, if you'd like to learn more about Hans and Star, you can always find us at marriageinitiative.org.